I didn't order a package today. That was my first thought when I heard the knock at the door, sharp and deliberate. It wasn't the hesitant tap of a neighbor or the careless slam of someone delivering junk mail. It was precise, expectant, like whoever was on the other side of the door knew I was home and wouldn't leave until I answered. I hesitated, wiping my hands on a dish towel. I'd just been finishing up breakfast, still in my usual at-home attire. Sweatpants, a loose shirt, nothing that screamed, ready for company. Peering through the peephole, I saw her, tall, slender, in a way that hinted at something inhuman. Her limbs just a little too long, her stance too still. She wore the standard deep blue courier uniform of the Interstellar Delivery Service, but on her, it looked tight, stretched over muscles that tensed and relaxed with a kind of natural grace. Her skin had a soft, pearlescent sheen, as if light clung to her, shifting in hues of deep blue and violet. And her eyes, large, focused, and predatory, fixed on my door like she could see me through it. I recognized her. How could I not? She'd been delivering to my neighborhood for months. Now, she always seemed a little too attentive, her gaze lingering on me longer than necessary when I signed for a package. Her sharp, clawed fingers brushing my skin just a little too deliberately when she handed something over. But today, something was different. Her breathing looked heavy, her chest rising and falling in a slow, deliberate way. Her tail, normally still, twitched behind her, curling and uncurling in agitated movements. Then she knocked again, harder this time. I swallowed, a strange mix of apprehension and intrigue settling in my gut. Slowly, I opened the door. Hey? She took a deep breath, nostrils flaring as her gaze locked onto me, pupils narrowing like a hunter locking onto prey. The moment stretched, thick with something unspoken. Then she exhaled through her nose and said in a voice that was entirely too smooth, too controlled, "Human, you have been ignoring my signals." I blinked. "You're what now?" She stepped forward, and I instinctively stepped back. Bad move. That slight retreat made something flash in her eyes, something that looked an awful lot like satisfaction. "I have been patient," she continued, voice lower now, almost a purr. "For months I have followed protocol. I have maintained my professionalism. I have waited for you to understand." "Understand what?" I asked, already not liking where this was going. She tilted her head slightly, her dark lips curling into a smile that was all sharp teeth and knowing amusement. "That I chose you." My stomach dropped. Chose me for what? Her tail flicked, her fingers tightening at her sides, claws just barely extending before she retracted them again. The restraint was obvious. And then she said the words that officially took my morning from weird to outright terrifying. Mating season. My brain short-circuited. I just stared at her, waiting for the punchline. But she didn't laugh. She just stared right back, unwavering, her body language shifting subtly, her shoulders squaring, her weight settling forward. Predatory. I think you have the wrong house," I said, forcing out an awkward chuckle, lifting my hands, like I could physically push the situation away. "I'm not..." She moved fast, faster than I thought possible. One moment she was standing at my doorstep, the next she was inside, the door snapping shut behind her as she loomed over me, not touching, not yet, but close enough that I could feel the unnatural warmth radiating off her skin. "This is not a mistake," she murmured, and this time her voice had a distinct huskiness to it, a rich, layered tone that sent a shiver down my spine. "I have studied you, your habits, your scent." "Oh hell no, scent?" I repeated, my voice hitting a register that was entirely too close to panic. Her eyes half-lidded, her expression filled with something I didn't want to name. "It is intoxicating." I took another step back. Bad move. She followed, closing the distance effortlessly, keeping me within arm's reach, Her tail curled around the air behind her like a cat on the verge of pouncing. "Look," I said, forcing my voice to stay steady. "I appreciate the, attention, but I think you're misunderstanding something. Humans don't just, you have no mate," she cut in smoothly. "No rival claims, no scent markings from others." I blinked. "That is not how human dating works." She tilted her head. "Then how do humans claim one another?" I opened my mouth, then shut it. This was not a conversation I ever expected to have, let alone at 8 in the morning with my alien delivery girl. She took my silence as something else. "I see," she said, her voice almost contemplative. "You require pursuit." Oh, that sounded bad. "Nope," I said quickly, hands up. "No pursuit necessary. I'm good, totally unclaimed and fine with it." She studied me, those sharp eyes tracing over every inch of my expression, like she was assessing the truth in my words. Then she exhaled slowly, and I swear I could feel the heat of it against my skin. "I will not take no for an answer," she said at last, voice dangerously soft. I swallowed, hard. "This is a misunderstanding," I tried again. "A huge cultural misunderstanding." She considered that. Then, slowly, a smile curled across her lips. A knowing, confident smile that made my stomach twist into something dangerously close to anticipation. "I will educate you, human," she purred. And just like that, I knew my quiet morning was over. I took another careful step back, but she matched me effortlessly, her long limbs moving with that eerie, predatory grace that made every inch of my instincts scream danger. Yet, at the same time, there was an undeniable pull in the air between us, something thick and electric, like static before a storm. I swallowed, trying to keep my thoughts clear, but her presence made it difficult. "Look," I said, keeping my hands up in the universal gesture of "please don't pounce on me." "I think we need to slow down here. You're clearly, dealing with something right now, and I don't think throwing a human into the mix is the best solution." She didn't blink. She just watched me, studying every tiny movement I made, and it sent a shiver down my spine. Then, in a voice as smooth as silk, wrapping around steel, she murmured, "Do you believe you have a choice in this?" I exhaled sharply, my pulse spiking. "Okay, that's concerning. You can't just force me," I said carefully, choosing my words. Like I was defusing a bomb. Her lips twitched, her sharp teeth barely peeking out from under that calm, knowing smile. "Force? No, I will not harm you, human. That would be inefficient." Her tail flicked again, betraying the tension she kept so well contained. She was restraining herself. That much was clear. But I had the distinct feeling that if I so much as made the wrong move, that fragile restraint would snap like a bowstring stretched too tight. "You're making it sound like I don't have a say in this," I said, keeping my tone as even as possible. She took a slow step forward, the sound of her boots against my floor almost eerily soft. She was too controlled, too measured, like every motion was calculated. "You misunderstand, human," she purred. "You are not prey. You are the chosen." I felt my stomach drop. Chosen by who? By me. She said it like it was the most obvious thing in the universe, like this was a decision that had been made long ago, and I was just catching up. Her eyes darkened slightly, her pupils dilating as she took another slow inhale, drinking in the scent of the space between us. "Your scent," she murmured again, almost to herself. "It drives me to distraction." I swallowed, my throat suddenly dry. "You are the one who smells like something's on fire," I shot back, because apparently sarcasm was my only remaining defense mechanism. Her smile widened just a fraction. "Yes, my pheromones are strong. I have ensured that you are exposed. To them." My brain stumbled over that. "Insured? What do you mean, insured?" She tilted her head slightly, her fingers flexing at her sides before she took another small step forward. The air felt thick between us, the tension coiling tighter, hotter. For weeks, I have adjusted my scent markers. Each package I delivered, each time I entered your space, I left traces, she admitted, her voice dripping with satisfaction. Subtle, but effective. Your biology is already responding. My stomach twisted. Responding? She took another deep breath, her pupils flaring. You have been dreaming of me, haven't you? My breath hitched, because no, that was just coincidence. That was not. I forced myself to shake my head. That's not. Whatever you're implying, I can promise you, it's not happening. She let out a soft, knowing hum, something dangerously close to amusement. You are resisting because you do not understand. But your body does. It has already begun adapting. Adapting. My voice cracked slightly, and I hated it. She exhaled slowly, her gaze sweeping over me in a way that sent an involuntary shiver down my spine. Yes. The exposure to my pheromones has been gradual, intentional. You are already drawn to me. You simply refuse to acknowledge it. I clenched my jaw. That's not how this works. Humans don't just... You have not stopped looking at my mouth, she interrupted, voice as smooth as a blade gliding over silk. My throat tightened, and I hadn't. Her lips were slightly parted now, her dark, inhumanly smooth skin catching the light just right. Her teeth were sharp, predatory, and yet some part of my brain, the traitorous, primitive part, was reacting to her closeness, to the heat rolling off her in waves. I forced myself to look away. That doesn't mean anything, I said, even though my pulse told a different story. She hummed again, pleased. Deny it if you wish. It will not change the outcome. I took a slow step to the side, trying to angle myself toward the door. Listen, I get that this is a thing for your species, but I really think you're misreading the situation. She followed my movement effortlessly, keeping the distance between us razor thin. Am I? Yes, I said firmly. Because I reached for the doorknob. She moved. One moment, she was standing in front of me. The next, I was pressed against the door, her arms braced on either side of me, her body just barely not touching mine. Heat radiated off her like a furnace, her scent thick and intoxicating. She caged me in, my breath caught in my throat. Do you still think I am misreading the situation, human? She murmured, her voice dangerously close to my ear. My hands twitched, at my sides, my entire body locked in place. Her tail brushed against my wrist, gentle, barely a whisper of contact. But it was enough to send a bolt of something sharp and electric through me, enough to make my breath stutter. She exhaled slowly, her voice wrapping around me like velvet. Your heart is racing. I clenched my fists. Because you cornered me. She hummed again, a deep, pleased sound. Yes, I did. A slow, unbearable silence stretched between us, and then she leaned in, close enough that her lips just barely hovered. Near my jaw, her breath warming my skin. Do you wish to know how I experienced this? She whispered. My pulse pounded in my ears, and I had no idea how to answer. I swallowed hard, every muscle in my body locked up as if moving even an inch would trigger something I wasn't prepared to handle. She was too close, too warm, too deliberate, and I could feel every inch of that distance shrinking, suffocating in its intensity. Her breath, slow and measured, ghosted against the side of my neck, and though she hadn't touched me yet, the weight of her presence pressed down like a gravitational pull I couldn't escape. Her words, low and controlled, carried something I couldn't quite name. Do you wish to know how I experienced this? I couldn't answer, not because I didn't want to, but because I didn't trust my own voice. I knew it would betray something, and yet my hesitation was its own kind of answer. She could hear the change in my breathing, feel the way my pulse hammered against my throat, smell whatever subtle shift in my body chemistry gave me away. She already knew. A soft, satisfied exhale left her lips, and I swore I could feel the heat of it seeping through my skin, winding through my nerves like a slow, methodical unraveling. "You humans," she murmured. "You speak in denials, but your bodies—" A quiet hum vibrated in her throat, something pleased, something knowing. "They betray you in the most exquisite ways." I clenched my jaw. "That's not—" She shifted slightly, her movements as fluid as water, and suddenly her tail was touching me. A light, grazing touch, tracing a slow path up the back of my hand, before curling just slightly around my wrist. Not enough to restrain, not enough to force, just enough to let me feel. I sucked in a sharp breath, my body tensing at the foreign sensation. Her skin was impossibly smooth, too warm, and yet there was something about the way her tail moved. Something that felt unbearably deliberate, each tiny shift calibrated to gauge my reaction. "See?" she whispered, and I could hear the smirk in her voice. I yanked my hand back on instinct, breaking the contact, but the motion only made her eyes darken, her pupils dilating as if I'd done something far more provocative. My retreat was its own kind of engagement, a signal, and I could tell she liked it. I forced my breath to steady, gripping the edge of the doorframe like it was an anchor. "This, whatever you're trying to do, it's not going to work," I said, making my voice as firm as possible. Her expression didn't waver. If anything, there was a slow, almost lazy amusement curling at the edges of her lips. "Oh," she murmured. "You say that with such conviction." "Because I mean it." Her gaze swept over me again, slow, studying. Then, in an infuriatingly calm tone, she asked, "Why?" I blinked. "Why?" "Yes." She tilted her head slightly, her tail flicking lazily behind her. "You resist. You insist upon your refusal. But why?" I scowled. "Because this is insane." Her lips curled at that. "Insane," she echoed, as if tasting the word, rolling it over her tongue like something foreign yet fascinating. "You call it insane because you are unfamiliar with it. And yet—" Her eyes gleamed. "If I were to step back now, if I were to leave you standing here, untouched, unclaimed, tell me, human, how long would it take before you thought of me again?" My breath hitched, and that was the problem. I didn't have an answer, because deep down, in some part of me I didn't want to acknowledge, I already knew. Not long. Not long at all. She saw the flicker of hesitation, and that knowing smirk deepened. She hummed, tilting her head slightly. "You see, your resistance is hollow, empty words meant to pacify yourself. But your mind," her gaze dragged over me, heavy with intent. "It will not let me go so easily." I clenched my jaw. "That's just because you did something to me." She let out a quiet laugh, low and smooth. "Is that what you tell yourself?" I took a step back, needing to put something between us, but she matched the movement, keeping the space between us unbearably thin. "You think I have manipulated you," she said, voice even, measured. "That my presence alone has forced this reaction from you." She leaned in slightly, her scent wrapping around me in a way that made my thoughts blur at the edges. "But tell me, human, if that were true," her lips hovered just inches from my ear, "why does it feel so natural?" A shiver ran through. "Oh, me, unbidden, unwanted." She noticed, her smile deepened. I gritted my teeth. "It's not what?" she interrupted, her voice a soft, dangerous whisper. "Not real, not right, or perhaps—" Her fingers flexed at her sides, as if restraining the urge to reach out. "Not something you wish to admit." I exhaled sharply. "You're not listening." "I am listening," she countered. "Far more than you realize." Her tail brushed my wrist again, lingering, testing. This time I didn't flinch away, and that tiny, damning hesitation made her eyes burn with satisfaction. You feel it, don't you? She whispered. That pull between us. I forced myself to hold her gaze, to push past the thick, suffocating weight of her presence, but it was like standing in the eye of a storm, knowing that the second I took a step, I'd be swept into something I wasn't sure I could control, and she knew it. She relished it. You want to resist, she murmured, her breath brushing my skin again, sending another involuntary shiver through me. But tell me, human, how much of that resistance is truly yours? Her fingers twitched, her restraint palpable. And for a moment, just a fraction of a second, I wondered what would happen if she stopped holding back. I forced a breath into my lungs, my pulse hammering in my ears like a war drum. I had to think. I had to regain control of this situation before she tipped it fully into her hands. But the way she stood there, so poised, so still, yet exuding a pressure that pressed against me like invisible hands, made it impossible to think straight. Her question still echoed in my head, wrapping around my thoughts like a whisper I couldn't shake. How much of that resistance is truly yours? The problem was, I didn't have an answer, and she knew that. She was watching me too closely, drinking, in every flicker of hesitation, every unspoken struggle that played out across my face. Her tail, still curled faintly around my wrist, gave a slow, deliberate squeeze. Not enough to trap, not enough to force, just enough to remind. I exhaled sharply and jerked my arm back, breaking the contact once again. Her tail flicked at the loss, but her expression didn't change. If anything, she looked even more satisfied, as if my retreat was the most interesting part of this entire encounter. I tried to steady myself. This whole thing, this ritual of yours, it doesn't involve me, I said, forcing conviction into my voice. You don't need me. You can find someone else, someone who actually wants to, but I do need you. Her words cut through the air like a blade, smooth and precise, slicing straight to the core of the argument before I could fully erect my defenses. I stiffened. That's not true. It is, she countered, and this time she did move closer. Not a dramatic step, just a slow, measured advance, the kind that let me feel every second of the distance shrinking. Do you wish to know why? I swallowed. I have a feeling you're going to tell me. She didn't smile this time. There was something else in her gaze now, something deeper, something that made my skin prickle. It wasn't just the heat of her presence anymore. It was certainty. You think I simply seek a partner, she murmured. That this is mere instinct, mere selection. She shook her head. You are wrong. I frowned, my breath still uneven. Then, what is it? She stopped just short of touching me, her tail twitching with restrained energy. Recognition. A chill crept down my spine. She tilted her head slightly, her eyes gleaming in the dim light. I do not seek just any mate. My kind, we are bound to something deeper. We do not merely choose. We are called. Her gaze locked onto mine, sharp as a blade. You call to me. I took a step back. She followed. I gritted my teeth. That's insane. She inhaled deeply, as if tasting something in the air, and her pupils flared wide. You feel it too, she whispered. Even now, as you resist. I clenched my jaw, trying to ignore the way my body reacted to the weight of her presence, the impossible rightness of her being this close. You are unfamiliar with it, she continued, voice smooth as silk. But your body knows. It recognizes me. I shook my head. That's not... Her fingers twitched at her sides, and I saw the battle playing out in her muscles. The barely restrained impulse to touch, to close the distance, but she held back, just barely. Instead, she said, Tell me, if I were to leave, now would you truly be relieved? I opened my mouth, ready to say yes, ready to push her away for good, but the words stuck in my throat, and that hesitation, it cost me everything. Her smirk returned, slow, knowing. "You cannot lie to me," she murmured. "Not in this." I exhaled sharply, trying to will my pulse into submission. This is chemistry, that's all." "A comfortable lie," she mused. "But lies will not spare you from truth." I took another step back, desperate for space, but I barely made it an inch before my back hit the wall. Her tail flicked once, her eyes flickering with something darker, something hungry. "You have two choices, human," she murmured. "You may deny me. Continue this game of resistance. Pretend that what is happening here is something you can simply dismiss." She leaned in, just enough for me to feel the warmth radiating from her skin, just enough for every nerve in my body to light up like a wire caught in a storm. "Or," she continued, her voice barely a whisper, "you can stop lying to yourself." My breath hitched, and she watched that reaction, savored it. For a long moment, neither of us moved. The tension was unbearable, thick and electric, stretching between us like something tangible, something alive. Then, just when I thought she might finally close the distance, finally push past whatever invisible line had held her back, she pulled away. A slow, deliberate retreat, a reversal of the hunt, and that, somehow, was worse. She stepped back with purpose, her expression unreadable, her tail giving one final flick before she turned fully. Then, over her shoulder, she murmured, "I will not force what is already written." And, with that, she was gone. The room felt hollow in her absence, the air too still. The weight of her presence had been so absolute that now, with her missing, something inside me felt off. And that terrified me more than anything else. I stood, there, pulse still hammering against my ribs, staring at the empty space where she had been. The air felt thick, as if the room itself was holding its breath, waiting for something that had just barely slipped away. My skin still tingled where she had been close, where her presence had pressed against me like an unspoken demand. I should have felt relief. That's what I told myself. That's what logic dictated. She was gone. The overwhelming presence, the relentless pursuit, the slow, steady unraveling of my defenses. It had all disappeared with her. And yet, as the seconds stretched, something in me resisted the idea that this was truly over. Because the way she had left wasn't final. It wasn't retreat. It was something far worse. A promise. I swallowed hard, pushing off the wall as if that alone could shake off the weight of what had just happened. My legs felt unsteady, like I had been running a marathon without realizing it, like the tension had drained something vital from me. I needed to get a grip. I needed to convince myself that she, wasn't something that had sunk its hooks into me. But that was a lie, and I was starting to realize that she knew that better than I did. I moved on autopilot, grabbing a glass of water, trying to drown the heat that lingered in my chest. But the second the cool liquid hit my throat, I felt the memory of her breath against my skin. Too close, too real, and I nearly dropped the glass. I exhaled sharply, bracing myself against the counter. This was ridiculous. I didn't even know her name. I clenched my jaw. No, that wasn't the problem. The problem was why she hadn't given it. Because names were a formality, a boundary between strangers, and she had already decided we weren't strangers. She had recognized me. The word slithered back into my mind, wrapping itself around my thoughts, refusing to let go. Recognition. As if I had been meant for this. As if I had been chosen long before I ever laid eyes on her. That was the most dangerous part of all of this. Because some sick, buried part of me, some part I had shoved deep into the cracks of my subconscious, was starting to wonder if she was right. I shook my head, forcing myself to move. Anything to break free of the spiral she had left in her wake. I went to the front door, locking it with more force than necessary, as if that would actually keep her out. As if a lock could stop something like her. Because deep down, I already knew the truth. she would be back. And the worst part, I wasn't sure if I wanted her to stay away. The next day, I did everything I could to shove the entire encounter into the back of my mind. I kept myself busy. I left the house, ran errands I didn't actually need to run, drowned myself in any distraction I could find. I convinced myself that if I just kept moving, the tension coiled inside me would eventually unwind. But it never did, because no matter how much distance I put between myself and my apartment, my thoughts always dragged me back to the impossible golden eyes that had burned straight through me, back to the way she had studied my every reaction, unraveling me thread by thread, back to the whisper of her voice, rich with certainty as she had said, "You call to me." I clenched my fists, forcing my focus back to the street ahead. No, that wasn't real. That was just her twisting things, bending them to her will. I wasn't calling to anything. I was just a guy trying to live a normal life until she showed up, until she turned my world inside out. I gritted my teeth and shoved my hands into my pockets, turning the corner onto my block. And then I felt it. Before I even saw her, before I had any real reason to know, my body knew. My pulse stuttered, my breath catching mid-step. The air around me felt charged, different, as if some invisible current had just shifted. I slowed instinctively, scanning the area, searching for something, someone. And then I saw her. She was sitting on the steps of my building, tail flicking lazily behind her, arms draped over her knees as if she had all the time in the world. Waiting. For me. My stomach twisted into knots. She lifted her gaze the second I stopped walking. And there it was again, that look, that quiet, unwavering confidence. As if she already knew exactly how this would play out. As if, no matter how much I fought, the ending had already been written, and worse, somewhere deep in my gut, I was starting to believe it too. I forced myself to take a slow breath, my hands curling into fists. I had two options. I could turn around, pretend I hadn't seen her, act like I had somewhere else to be, or I could march up those steps, tell her again that this wasn't happening, that I wasn't some destined match for an alien in her mating season. Neither option felt like a victory, because no matter what I chose, she had already won. And judging by the way her lips curled into that infuriating smirk, she knew it too. I clenched my jaw and took a step forward. Her gaze never wavered. The game had started again. And this time, I wasn't sure if I wanted to win. I climbed the steps slowly, as if approaching a wild animal. But that was the problem. She wasn't wild. Everything about her was too deliberate, too aware. She wasn't acting on instinct alone. She was calculating, playing some invisible game I didn't understand, but that I had already been dragged into. And the worst part, I had a sinking feeling I was losing. Her tail flicked again as I stopped a few feet from her, the lazy motion betraying an undeniable satisfaction. She was comfortable, relaxed, as if she already knew how this conversation would end, as if she had already decided. I exhaled sharply. Not this time. "You can't just wait outside my apartment," I said, keeping my voice steady. She tilted her head, the movement slow, studying. "Why not?" That threw me for a second. "Because," I gestured vaguely, "because it's weird. Normal people don't do that." Her eyes gleamed, and something about the way she looked at me made my skin feel too tight. "You keep using that word," I frowned. "What word?" "Normal." She shifted, resting her chin on her knees, gaze never leaving mine. "As if you believe it applies to you." A flicker of unease crawled down my spine. I forced a scoff. "It does apply to me. I'm just a guy, a regular boring guy. You're the one who—" I gestured vaguely again, as if that could encompass all of this. "You're the one who's making this complicated." She watched me for a beat too long, and then she smiled. Not a smirk, Not the teasing, knowing expression she had worn before, but something deeper. Something that unsettled me in a way I couldn't quite put into words. "You really believe that, don't you?" she murmured. A chill curled in my stomach. I didn't answer, because for the first time since this whole mess started, I had the sinking realization that she wasn't just toying with me. That maybe, just maybe, she knew something I didn't. She rose slowly, and I had to fight the urge to step back. She wasn't threatening. She wasn't even that close. But the weight of her presence felt inevitable, like gravity itself was bending around her, dragging me in inch by inch. I clenched my fists. "Stay in control." She stopped just shy of my space, watching me through dark lashes. "You're not as normal as you think," she said softly. "And I wonder if you're starting to realize that too." A lump formed in my throat. "I don't know what you're talking about." Her lips parted slightly, as if she might argue, as if she might push. But then, just as quickly, something in her gaze shifted, changed. The air between us stretched, charged with something I couldn't name. And then, instead of pressing forward, she took a step back. I blinked. "I'll wait," she murmured, more to herself than to me. And then, before I could even process it, she turned, walking away with the same measured, confident steps that made my pulse stutter. I exhaled sharply, tension still coiled in my spine. She was letting me go, but the worst part, it didn't feel like a victory. It felt like a trap. I barely made it inside before the weight of that encounter crashed down on me. The door clicked shut, and I pressed my back against it, running a hand down my face. My pulse was erratic, breath uneven, and for the life of me, I couldn't tell if it was from fear, adrenaline, or something far worse. She had let me go. That should have felt like relief. It should have been a sign that I had some control in this situation. And yet, the way she said it, "I'll wait," unsettled me more than anything else, because she wasn't just talking about tonight. I pushed off the door and started pacing, forcing my brain to analyze this properly. I needed to think, needed to approach this like any other problem, step by step. Logically, step 1. She was an alien. That much was obvious. She wasn't human, no matter how deceptively close she seemed. The tail, the ears, the faint luminescence beneath her skin. There was no denying that she was from somewhere else. Step 2. She was fixated on me, and that was the real problem, wasn't it? If she had just been some alien passing through, some stranger I'd never see again, this would be a weird story I'd tell over drinks years from now. But she wasn't going away. She was watching, waiting, and no matter how much I wanted to, convince myself this would all blow over, I felt it, deep in my gut, that this was only just beginning. I exhaled sharply, gripping the edge of the counter. Why me? Of all the people in the city, why had she latched onto me? What had I done to catch her attention? And more importantly, what did she want? The answer should have been obvious. The heat in her gaze, the way she invaded my space, the possessiveness laced into every teasing remark. It all pointed to one thing. But the way she acted, the way she studied me, the way she spoke as if she knew something I didn't, told me there was something more at play. I needed to figure it out, and fast. A sharp knock at the door nearly made me jump out of my skin. I spun, heart slamming against my ribs. For a second, I almost expected to see her standing there again, gaze filled with amusement at how easily she could rattle me. But the silhouette on the other side of the frosted glass wasn't hers. Relief warred with unease as I hesitated, then pulled the door open. Max stood there, brow furrowed. "Dude, you good?" I exhaled slowly. "Yeah, just long night." Max gave me a look, the kind that said he knew I was lying but wasn't about to call me out on it. He stepped inside, rubbing the back of his neck. "So, this is gonna sound weird, but..." He paused. "Have you noticed anything off lately?" I stiffened. Define off. Max shifted, clearly uncomfortable. I don't know, man. I just keep getting this weird feeling, like someone's watching me. And not in the normal paranoid way, like actually watching me. Ice slid down my spine. I swallowed. You see anything? No. His frown deepened. That's the problem. I should have, right? But every time I feel it, there's nothing there. He let out a sharp breath. It's freaking me out. A flicker of suspicion coiled in my gut. How long has this been going on? A few days. Maybe a week. He gave me a side eye. Why? You feeling it too? I hesitated. Then, carefully, I said. Something like that. Max exhaled. Great. That makes me feel so much better. I ran a hand through my hair, mind racing. If Max was experiencing this too, then this wasn't just about me. This wasn't some random fixation. It was bigger than that. And that terrified me. The knock at the door came again. I froze. Max frowned. Expecting someone? No. No, I wasn't. I turned, pulse hammering. The silhouette beyond the frosted glass was hers. I didn't need to see the details to know. The shift of her weight, the flick of her tail. It was her. I barely had time to react before Max stepped forward, hand reaching for the doorknob. I grabbed his wrist, grip tightening before I could stop myself. Max shot me a startled look. Dude, I swallowed. My mouth was dry. Don't. Max's eyes narrowed. He looked at me, then at the door, and to my surprise, he let go. Something in his expression shifted. You know who it is, he said quietly. It wasn't a question. I didn't answer. Max stepped back, but the weight of his gaze was heavier than any accusation. I forced my shoulders to relax, forced my breath to steady. Then slowly, I reached for the knob. I opened the door. She stood there, bathed in the glow of the streetlights. And she was smiling. Not the teasing smirk. Not the coy little upturn of her lips. But something deeper. Something satisfied. As if this was exactly what she had expected. As if she knew, no matter how much I fought it, I was already caught in her web. She took a step forward, and my entire body tensed, every nerve on high alert. The door frame was the only thing between us now, but it felt like no barrier at all. Her presence had a weight to it, something thick and pressing, something that stole the air from my lungs. And her eyes, they didn't just look at me, they consumed. I should have shut the door, should have told her to leave, should have done something. But my muscles locked in place, as if responding to some unspoken force, as if she was already in control, and I just hadn't realized it yet. Her tail curled lazily behind her, a slow, deliberate motion, like a cat toying with its prey. She wasn't speaking, wasn't pushing her way inside. No, she was waiting for me to make the next move. Max shifted behind me. I could feel his stare drilling into the back of my skull, waiting for an explanation I didn't have. I could sense his confusion, the rising tension, the way his instincts were screaming that something wasn't right, and yet he wasn't saying anything, because he could feel it too. That pull, that quiet, dangerous something that wrapped around the air whenever she was near. I forced myself to swallow, to breathe, to find my voice. What are you doing here? Her smile didn't falter. If anything, it deepened, eyes glinting with something unreadable. I told you. The words rolled off her tongue, slow and deliberate. I'll wait. My stomach clenched. Max straightened, glancing between us. His brow furrowed. You know her? I opened my mouth, hesitated. I couldn't explain this. The delivery girl's head tilted, those otherworldly eyes flicking briefly toward Max. There was no hostility there, no direct threat, and yet, somehow, her presence alone was enough to make him take half a step back. A reactionary movement, something instinctive, something he wasn't even aware he was doing. Her attention returned to me, and the moment stretched. "I've been patient," she murmured, stepping closer. I should have stepped back, should have done anything to break the spell she was weaving around me, but my body refused to listen. Her fingers lifted, hovering just shy of my chest, never quite touching, but close enough that I could feel the heat of her skin, close enough that it sent a ghost of sensation skittering down my spine. "You're making this harder than it needs to be." Her voice was like silk, soft and dangerous, curling around my senses and digging deep. I clenched my jaw. "I don't even know what this is." Her lips parted slightly, and for the first time, there was something close to frustration flickering across her expression. It was brief, so brief I almost missed it, but it was there. She exhaled, slow and steady, as if steadying herself. Then, softly, dangerously, she whispered, "You will." A shiver shot through me, primal and unbidden. Max suddenly cleared his throat, the sound jarring in the thick silence. "Okay," he said, tone carefully neutral. "I think we all need to take a step back here." The delivery girl didn't even glance at him. Her gaze was locked onto mine, unwavering, unrelenting. I forced myself to speak. "You should go." Something flickered in her expression. Not anger, not disappointment. Something else, something deeper. Then, without another word, she turned and walked away. I exhaled a breath I hadn't realized I was holding, my entire body sagging against the doorframe. Max stared at me. "Dude, what the hell was that?" I shook my head. "I don't know." But that was a lie. Because deep down, I did. And I wasn't sure which scared me more, the fact that I understood it, or the fact that a part of me didn't want her to stop. That night, sleep was out of the question. Lay in bed staring at the ceiling, my mind looping through the encounter again and again. The way she stood in the doorway, the weight of her presence, the way her voice coiled around me like something tangible. I had felt hunted, and yet I hadn't moved. I exhaled slowly, running a hand down my face. Max had gone home after grilling me for an hour, but I hadn't been able to give him any real answers. Because what could I say? That my alien delivery girl had been acting strange, that she had looked at me like she was waiting for something. No, not waiting, claiming. I shuddered, rolling over. The blankets felt too heavy, my skin too warm, my thoughts an unrelenting mess. I squeezed my eyes shut, trying to force my body into rest. Then, a sound. Soft, almost imperceptible. But I heard it. I went still, breath catching in my throat. My heartbeat kicked up. Something shifted outside my window. Slowly, I turned my head. The curtains were drawn, but the streetlight outside cast faint illumination along the edges, enough to see shadows moving. Another sound, not footsteps, not breathing. Something else. A presence, a weight in the air that pressed against my instincts, sending a ripple of unease through my spine. I swallowed. My hand inched toward my phone, fingers brushing the smooth surface. Then, a whisper. Soft. Right against the glass. My stomach clenched. Didn't want to look. I needed to. Slowly, too slowly, I turned my head. A silhouette. Tall, too tall. Standing outside my window, completely still. Watching. The blood in my veins turned to ice. I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. The shape shifted, and the faintest hint of violet light flickered against the window pane. Eyes, her eyes. I swallowed hard, pulse hammering in my throat. What are you doing?" My voice was hoarse, barely more than a whisper, a long beat of silence. Then, "You locked the door." I shuddered. Yes, a pause. Then, softly, almost sweetly, "You shouldn't have." My lungs clenched. This wasn't happening. This couldn't be happening. I forced myself upright, shoving the blankets away. The weight of her gaze was suffocating. I licked my lips. You can't just be here. Her silhouette didn't move. But I am. Something about the way she said it, so simple, so matter-of-fact, sent a chill crawling down my spine. She wasn't leaving. I forced my legs to move, swinging out of bed. My hand found the window latch, hesitating only for a second before I yanked it open. Cold air rushed in, but it wasn't just the night chill that made me shiver. She stood there watching me, her skin gleaming faintly under the streetlight. Her tail swayed behind her, slow and deliberate. "Why are you here?" I asked again, my voice quieter this time. Her head tilted. "You know why?" I clenched my jaw. "I don't." A lie. She knew it was a lie. Her expression didn't change, but something in her eyes darkened. A slow, creeping shift in the air. "Do you really want me to say it?" My breath hitched. I didn't. I really, really didn't. But she wanted me to hear it. She wanted me to admit it, and that terrified me more than anything. I stood there, frozen, gripping the windowsill as if it could anchor me, as if I wasn't staring down something inevitable. The night air wrapped around me, cool, but not nearly cold enough to douse the slow burn beneath my skin. She stood there, poised in the half-light, her tail swaying in slow, deliberate motions, her gaze unwavering. There was no aggression in her stance, no overt demand, but something in the way she held herself, the way her eyes didn't so much as flicker away from mine, sent a deep, primal awareness crawling up my spine. She wasn't asking. She was waiting, and I had no idea what answer she was willing to accept. "I locked the door for a reason," I said, my voice low. I had meant for it to come out firmer, steadier, but it just sounded uncertain. "Yes," she said simply. No argument, no question. Just yes. Something about that rattled me more than I cared to admit. I inhaled sharply. "You can't be here." "I can," she corrected. "You just don't want me to be." The breath caught in my throat. I hated how easily she unraveled my words, how smoothly she peeled back every layer I tried to wrap around myself. I hated that she was right. She didn't step forward, didn't press, but that was almost worse, because she wasn't leaving. Her presence coiled around me like something tangible, and I felt the weight of her waiting press against my ribs. I wanted to say something, anything, but my throat had gone dry, and she knew it. The silence stretched between us, charged, brimming with something I refused to name. Then, slowly, she turned her head, letting her gaze drag deliberately toward the door. "You should let me in," she murmured. A shiver licked its way down my spine. I didn't move. I shouldn't move. But my fingers twitched against the windowsill. She didn't look back at me right away. Instead, she lifted her hand, clawed fingers tracing absently over the frame of the window, not pressing, just feeling. The motion was slow, almost absent-minded, but something about it sent my pulse hammering in my ears. Then finally, she met my gaze again. "Unless you want me to come in another way." My breath stilled in my lungs. I didn't doubt her. Not for a second. I couldn't doubt her. Not when she was standing there, looking at me like that, speaking with the kind of quiet certainty that left no room for disbelief. I swallowed hard. And then, I moved. Not much, not enough to be a real choice. Just enough to shift my weight, enough to loosen my grip on the windowsill, enough to make the tension in my body crack just a little. And she saw. Her lips parted slightly, something flickering in her expression, something satisfied. My pulse roared in my ears. I turned stiffly, forcing my legs to carry me to the door, each step measured, too aware of how she was still standing there, watching, waiting. The lock felt heavier than it should have, the simple mechanism suddenly a barrier that felt both too thin and too impenetrable at the same time. I hesitated, fingers hovering over it. She didn't speak. She didn't have to. I exhaled slowly, and then I turned the lock. The sound of it clicking open felt deafening. I barely had time to brace myself before the door eased inward. Not pushed, not forced, just a slow, deliberate movement as she stepped inside, moving with a grace that sent another shiver crawling across my skin. She didn't stop, didn't waver, didn't hesitate. She moved closer until the space between us barely existed, until I had to tilt my chin to hold her gaze. The faint, pulsing glow of her eyes reflected against my skin, casting shadows along the planes of my face. I swallowed. "This is a bad idea," she hummed, tilting her head. "Is it?" The way she said it, light, teasing, almost curious, made my breath hitch. "Yes." A pause. Then why did you let me in?" My stomach tightened. I had no answer for that. I should have. But I didn't. Because in that moment, the only thing I could focus on was the way her presence filled every inch of the space around me. The way the warmth of her body was so close that it might as well have been pressing into me. I had made a mistake. A terrible, terrible mistake. And she knew it. She stepped forward, slow and deliberate, her presence pressing against me before her body ever did. The air between us was charged, dense, with something that had no name but could be felt in the way my breath stilled, in the way my skin prickled like static was rolling over it. I should have backed up. I should have told her to stop. I did neither, because she wasn't just moving toward me, she was studying me. The glow in her eyes flickered, shifting subtly as her pupils narrowed, then widened again, adjusting like a predator assessing its prey. Not out of malice, not out of cruelty, but out of something far more instinctual. And yet, I didn't feel hunted. Not exactly. No, this was something else. Something worse. Something that made my stomach tighten and my fingers curl against my sides. Useless things that refused to form fists, refused to take a stand, refused to push back against the sheer weight of her. "Your heart rate has increased," she murmured. I swallowed. That tends to happen when someone corners you in your own home. She didn't blink, didn't even flinch. Instead, she leaned in, not enough to touch, but enough to make the space between us feel like an illusion, something fragile, something waiting to be shattered with the slightest movement. "I am not cornering you," she said. "You have a clear path to leave." A shiver ran through me, because she wasn't lying. The hallway stretched behind me, open, unobstructed. There was nothing keeping me here except me. She had given me an out. I hadn't taken it. Her lips parted slightly, her nostrils flaring in an almost imperceptible movement as she breathed me in. The tension in my gut coiled tighter. "Are you afraid?" she asked. Her voice was soft, but there was no mistaking the undercurrent beneath it. It wasn't a taunt, it was a test, and we both knew it. I inhaled carefully, trying to steady myself. Should I be? That time, she did blink. Something flickered in her expression, something that almost looked like approval. "I would never harm you," she said, and there was something deeply final about the way she said it, like the very thought of it was absurd, impossible. She meant it. I didn't know how I knew that, but I did. And yet, that wasn't the fear I had meant. That wasn't the threat I was wrestling with. Because harm had never been my concern. Control had, my own, hers. Whatever this was, whatever she was, it was something outside my comprehension, outside my ability to predict or contain. She was a force of nature, not malevolent, not aggressive, but undeniable. And she was still waiting, still watching, still listening for something unspoken. Then, slowly, she moved again. One step, then another. Each deliberate, each measured, until the space between us became nothing at all. Her body wasn't touching mine, but it was close. Closer than anything should be, closer than logic should allow, and still, she did not press, did not claim, did not reach. She just was. And I couldn't breathe, because this was worse than her touching me. This was restraint. This was patience. This was a game that I didn't know the rules to, but she did. And she was winning. Her voice came softer this time. You don't know what to do with me. It wasn't a question. It wasn't even an accusation. It was simply the truth. And I had nothing to say in return, because she was right. I had no idea what to do with her, but she knew exactly what to do with me.